As disgusting as it is to say, we're already almost halfway through with the decade of the 2020s, and it got me thinking today I'm going to be going over the best UFC title wins of the 2020s and the worst, the most impressive and the least impressive, if you will. Not to say that getting a championship win can be qualified as something that's not impressive, but relatively, these are the wins that, I mean, put plain and simple, are the best of the past few years, or are the worst of the worst. If there's any picks that you guys think that I missed out on, let me know in the comments below. We're just here to talk some MMA, but I try to use my better judgment, but obviously I can't include them all, sadly. But we're going to be starting off with Alexander Volkanovski defeating Brian Ortega at UFC 266, September 2021. Now, even though Volk is genuinely my favorite fighter, only motherfucker I have a t-shirt for, I'm literally looking at the thing right now in my closet, I feel like the whole maximum or a loss from Volk and this whole kind of like the time off, and we're just kind of sitting and dwelling on the Topuria loss and the Makhachev loss, and we're forgetting, people forget, man, but we're forgetting about the legendary title reign of I can't even get the motherfucker's name right, but of Alexander Volkanovski. It was hard to pick which win I thought was the most impressive, but when you look at the matchup against Brian Ortega, I mean, Volk really did have to go through some adversity in this fight. Now, don't get me wrong, for the most part, it was a dominant win, but the problems that Ortega gave Volk on the ground, especially with those two really, really close submission attempts, all it did was build up the stock of Volk and just went to show how tough of a motherfucker he is, because you got to realize at this time, this was one of Volk's earlier title defenses, so he was kind of still defeating the allegations of, oh, Holloway's the real champ, Holloway, you robbed Holloway, and like, he was kind of starting to just still come into his own as the champion. This was like his first fight, bald head Volk, that we all know and love, you know what I mean? When you look at how this fight went down, and the differential and the strikes, and you just look at how well Volk overcame those two submission attempts from Brian Ortega, man, it really is impressive, and it's just another one of those fights that went to show how well-rounded Volk really is, because, I mean, Jesus Christ, Volk was piecing him up on the feet, and he was looking good, and he was putting forward the pressure, and he was kind of dictating where he wanted the fight to go, but like, and even then, like, even in terms of the control time, Volk got the better of him there as well, but again, just for how impressive he looked, and how many people were probably jumping out of their seats thinking that Ortega was about to steal this one in, like, what was it, like the third and the fifth round, the attempts were, but Volkanovski landed 214 significant strikes comparatively to Brian Ortega's 88. So overall, Volkanovski went out there, whipped him, showed that there's levels, showed more weapons in the arsenal, and I feel like this was the win that really kind of solidified Volk as the champion. You know, we weren't just kind of looking at this guy anymore as the guy that, oh, like, this guy robbed Holloway. Now he was kind of starting to become in his own, and people started to tilt their head and say, you know what, this guy's kind of badass. So, but it was a fantastic win from Volk, and I miss it. So moving on up next to one of the worst title wins of this decade, and it is Aljamain Sterling's win over TJ Dillashaw at UFC 280. Now, I understand, like, it is really easy to kind of shit on Aljo and all this bullshit, but I actually think that Aljo is very, very underrated. I think people dwell a little bit too much on how he won the belt, and they dwell a little bit too much on this fight I'm about to talk about, so they kind of, like, it stains his reign, but Sterling does have a really good legacy, and even though he's kind of funky on the feet, no pun intended, the guy is really, really skilled, so it's just unfortunate that this defense against TJ Dillashaw, TJ really did just hold the fucking division for hostage, whether he meant to or not. I mean, you know what you're doing when you're going in there and you're dealing with this whole shoulder injury and it's popping out every damn training session, exaggeration, but you know what I'm saying? To go into a title fight as someone that's elite as Sterling, and you know that bantamweight is stacked, especially at that time, and there were other clear contenders ready to go against Sterling, but TJ just fucking did his thing, and then he retired after this, I'm pretty sure. So it was pretty rough, and unfortunately, I mean, Sterling's 72 significant strikes comparatively to TJ Dillashaw's 8 plus the 7 minutes of control time for the round and a half that this fight ended up lasting. It just wasn't a good look for either guy. And I know that people are saying like, oh, Sterling should have went out there and he should have taken out TJ in one round. Why did he even get him to the second? Okay, I understand that, but it's probably a lot easier said than done. You know what I mean? And Sterling isn't the biggest finisher in the world anyway, so it's unfortunate, man, because Sterling, I feel like, does have a good resume, but this is just one of those title wins where there's so many asterisks next to it because you know that the opponent, I mean, TJ Dillashaw was good, but at the end of the day, he just brought nothing for Sterling in that fight, and he went into the fight injured. I mean, I'm pretty sure the shoulder popped out almost, immediately into the fight, and unfortunately, it kind of just made it an embarrassment for both guys when it really didn't need to be. You could have just fed Sterling a more deserving contender and someone who actually was healthy, and I feel like it would have been a lot better for Sterling's title reign, and it just would have been better for the caliber of opponent, but unfortunately, TJ kind of went in there, and he fucked it up, so I can't really count this as a good win. Unfortunately, it's one of the worst title wins we've seen this decade. I'm not going to count like Sterling's like DQ win over Jan via the illegal knee. I'm not talking about all that kind of shit, but it is what it is. But moving on up next to another one of the best wins, we're talking about Jan Blachowicz's win over Israel Adesanya at UFC 259. This was still during the COVID era or whatever, but this was a great win for Jan Blachowicz and what really put him on the map. The big storyline going into this one was obviously Izzy was white hot. He was the face of the company, and then Jan Blachowicz, as he was rising the ranks, and it was really great to see him kind of win the title, but there were so many people that were kind of sleeping on Jan going into this fight. The weight or size advantage or not, like, it really didn't matter. Adesanya was riding all the hype in the world at the time, and of course everybody was going to be looking over Jan, especially in the striking department comparatively to someone as skilled as Adesanya. But dude, Blachowicz outstruck him, you know what I mean? Those first 3 rounds, Blachowicz didn't even shoot a takedown. He was still outlanding Izzy, and he was looking crisp on the feet, and then in the last 2 rounds when he actually decided to incorporate the ground game, it kind of just solidified the win even more. And it was a fantastic performance from Blachowicz. I know he lost the title immediately after this, but I'm happy that he had his moment where he was getting a lot of respect, and he put on a great win over the second best middleweight of all time. And I mean, 7 minutes total of control time for Blachowicz, and again, wasn't even shooting takedowns to those last couple rounds. Outstruck Izzy 107 significant strikes to Adesanya 78. It's not even like Adesanya looked that bad in that fight, and I know that some people kind of like used the weight. I mean, what was he, like 190 going into it, and Blachowicz was probably like inside the cage. I mean, he still made the weight at 205, so you got to imagine you're doing like a 230 Blachowicz in there, and I think unfortunately it definitely didn't help Adesanya's chances. But at the end of the day, man, like, you're moving up to light heavyweight. These are big motherfuckers, and you can't really use that as like an excuse for Adesanya. But at the end of the day, it was a great win for Blachowicz. He outschooled Adesanya in the feet, outstruck Adesanya in the feet, and it was a great, well-rounded performance from Blachowicz, and he really showed everything he's got in the arsenal for the most part. So it was a good win and really put Blachowicz on the map. So moving on up next to another one of the good wins from this decade, Islam Makhachev's win over Charles Oliveira. The legendary Charles Oliveira title run finally came to an end via Makhachev, and I know a lot of people going in this one were like, oh my god, Oliveira's an underdog, and you have people really not learned yet. This Makhachev guy just keeps beating last-minute step-ups, and he's fighting all these cans and shit. But Makhachev really went out there, and he schooled Oliveira, and I'm a big Oliveira fan, so as much as it hurts to say, I mean, that's really what happened. I mean, I understand that the fight only lasted a round and a half, but in the little time that the fight went down, I mean, Makhachev completely went out there, but he went out there and he submitted the guy who, A, was at the top of the fucking world, riding all the hype in the world. He was the real lightweight champ, and on top of that, he has the record for the most submissions in UFC history, and Oliveira still, in general, is just one of the most dangerous grapplers in the UFC. So to go out there and beat him at his own game was unbelievable, and Makhachev, even on the feet, was putting forward that pressure, and he was outstriking Oliveira. I know some people say that Oliveira looked off in that fight, and Oliveira was like, I'm not 100% for that one, but you know what? It was a great win for Makhachev. Who knows how the fight would have played out if they ended up running it back when they were supposed to, before Fat Volk ended up stepping in. That ended up just fucking up the timeline, bro. Makhachev went out there, and he beat Oliveira on the feet, and then he beat him on the ground where he's at his best. So it's just, he looked great out there, and now here we are a couple years later, and this guy's one win away from being the lightweight GOAT, if some people don't already have him there already. So moving on up next to, going back to the worst side of things, let's talk about Jon Jones's win over Dominic Reyes at UFC 247. I'm pretty sure this was the first title fight of the decade, if I'm not wrong, but I mean, dude, what do I even say, man? Most people thought that Dominic Reyes won the fight. We all refer to this as the robbery of the century, let alone the decade. And Jon Jones, we were witnessing kind of, I don't even want to say decline, because the motherfucker never really stopped losing, but like, we kind of saw that, like, he's taking Anthony Smith to a decision, and he's taking Thiago Santos to a close decision, and then you had the Reyes fight, and Reyes went out there and he won the first 3 rounds. And don't get me wrong, Jones did have his moments in this fight, and he showed the championship level, like, grit and experience, and that's kind of why he came back in the 4th and the 5th, and he did look good in those rounds, and he won those too. But at the end of the day, the score is still 3-2, and Dominic Reyes outstruck Jon Jones 116 to 104, and I understand while that's relatively close, at the end of the day, most of us consider this a huge robbery. You can't win a fight alone based off the ending. This isn't Joe Rogan rules. I also think one of the judges had it 49-46 for favor of Jones, so it's just, I don't even know what these judges are smoking. It must have been Ala Labert or whatever the fuck her name is. Just a brutal robbery, and the fact that Jones ended up taking that 3-year layoff after this, what a weird coincidence. So moving on up next to, going back to one of the more better wins of this decade, we're we're going to be going with Belal Muhammad's win over Leon Edwards at UFC 304 from 2024 this year. Belal Muhammad, man, going into this fight, he was saying that, like, going into the Sean Brady fight, going into this Edward fight, like, when you piss him off and when he feels so disrespected, when he has, like, an anger going into that fight, that he's going to bring out that relentless side. And don't get me wrong, when Belal's not pissed off, like, we've seen him go out there and he could put on pace and pressure on guys and outvalue them. But for the Sean Brady fight and for the Leon Edwards fight, it was a different energy, man. Hey, I'm the real champ. I'm doing the most out here. Khabib's ordering coffees off me in the gym. You guys can say whatever you want. Your guys' hate just makes me stronger. Keep it coming. What the fudge are you guys talking about? Belal Muhammad went out there, and not only against Leon Edwards did he outstrike him, okay, and the biggest differential that people were saying going into this fight is that Leon Edwards just has too good of striking. He's too technical up there. He's too fast, too precise. Belal, he's just a smudge, man. He's just a big-ass underdog. There's no way he's going to outstrike Leon Edwards. There's no way his grappling is going to be enough. Leon Edwards took down Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards has shown amazing takedown defense and defensive grappling in his last few fights and amazing progress, and what the hell is Belal Muhammad going to be able to do? He went out there and not only did he rock Leon Edwards at one point in the earlier rounds, but he also outstruck him in the numbers from the start of the fight to the finish. And then, don't even get me started on the grappling, because 12 minutes total of control time and 9 takedowns for Belal out of the 13. And don't get me wrong, Leon Edwards did have some moments in this fight. He got 2 takedowns in. He did have a few minutes of control time in there. But at the end of the day, it felt like Belal Muhammad was going out there and he was just dominating this fight and totally dictating where he wanted it to go. He was outstriking him on the feet. He was whooping him on the ground. And for as easy it is to just shit on Belal, this was a fantastic win for him. And this is definitely his best win on his already solid resume. I don't even want to call it solid. Like, Belal Muhammad does have a really good resume. And the fact that just going into this, he was such a big underdog, the fact that people were just making it seem like there was such a big gap between these two, and everyone was talking about how the first fight went down. Headshot dead, bruv. How'd the first fight go? Keep talking, bruv. Headshot dead. It was a win that finally people were able to put respect on Belal Muhammad, and they're kind of turning their heads and like, maybe this guy isn't complete ass. Like, fans kind of get it twisted sometimes, and I can understand, but like, I feel like with the Ian Garys or the Paddy Pimbletts or like these Belals that we're talking about right now, like, it's easy for fans to kind of get it twisted in their head because you kind of hate this guy so much, or he just is kind of acting like a meme, or he doesn't have that aura, or you just don't like the guy, or he seems like a goofy goober, and you look at it and you go, oh, this guy's about to get his ass whooped, and then you say that time and time and again, but yet these motherfuckers keep winning. And I feel like the Leon Edwards win was finally the one where now people are kind of like, oh, okay, this guy can go out there and he can beat Shavkat, he can beat JDM. It was a great win for Belal and put himself on the map. So moving on, up next to another one of the worst performances, we're talking about Israel Adesanya's win over Yoel Romero at UFC 248. And I'm pretty sure this was the pay-per-view right after the John Jones versus Dominic Reyes one, so rough time for title fights. We did get Zhang versus Joanna in that time though, which was an amazing fight. So talking about this one specifically, what the fuck was this, dog? Okay, I'm gonna tell you what it was. It was unfortunately a waste of 25 minutes, man. We were so excited for this fight, and the fact that Adesanya was calling for it, Adesanya's like, I want the toughest fight in the division, I want Romero next, like, give him to me, and like, we thought that this was gonna be a banger back and forth, and especially with where Romero was at before this fight and with Adesanya where he was at before this fight, like, these guys were putting on exciting fights, and this one was a fucking stinker. 48 significant strikes total for Israel Adesanya over the 25 minutes, and 40 from Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero, the hunched up stance the entire time, was barely throwing, was kind of just waiting until he got in the pocket and was just gonna explode there. Like, I understand that this was his third loss in a row, the Adesanya one, and like, he already had a couple chances at the belt prior, so I feel like he knew that he needed to go out there and he needed this win because he might not get another title shot after this. I feel like he kind of sensed that this could have been his last chance, so maybe that's why he was fighting kind of timid and why he thought that he was going to be able to just catch Adesanya in a flurry in the pocket, but it's not ended up what happened. And Adesanya, I gotta like give it to him because I'm not just putting this fight all on Romero or all on Adesanya. This is a mutual fucking up here, okay? Adesanya, I get it, he's a very technical striker, he knows how to maintain the distance, he knows how to keep a good pace flowing, but when you have this is worse. I almost put like the Jerry Cannonier fight on here for Adesanya. I almost put like the Whitaker rematch. The Whitaker rematch not necessarily was like a boring fight, but a lot of people thought Whitaker won. I was trying to pick a defense for Adesanya that I just thought was the worst of the reign, and this one, it's just bad. The fact that people were so excited for this fight and it just completely under-delivered, barely any strikes thrown, no big moments happened in this fight at all. It was a big letdown, and it is what it fucking is, man. Moving on, up next to another one of the better title wins now. Still talking about Adesanya, but on the opposite end now. Sean Strickland's win over Adesanya at UFC 293. Here's the fucking thing, you guys. I'm never gonna lose to a man who paints his fucking nails. I'm gonna go gonna go to war for you people. Sean Strickland, man, this fight, okay, so when a lot of people watch this for the first time, or even the few months afterwards, like, I feel like it was more so people in their mind were just thinking about how poorly Adesanya looked, or like, oh, that was not the right Adesanya. Oh, Adesanya he didn't look good in there. Oh, Adesanya, he just wasn't as motivated for Strickland as he was, coming off of like such highs like a Pereira or a Whitaker. And like, dude, you can only make so many excuses. I'm not trying to put any disrespect on Adesanya, okay? And I really do think that Adesanya gets way too much shit. It's like he's borderline underrated at this point. But dude, this wasn't just a bad performance from Izzy. I really think that in retrospect, Sean Strickland went out there and he just totally outclassed Adesanya. I even think Adesanya, you could say whatever you want, good day, bad day. Like, Strickland knew what he was doing going in that fight. I'm sure that he had a game plan, that team, him and the team ended up executing well, and he went out there and he completely outstruck Adesanya. He dictated the pace of the fight. He was putting forward the pressure the entire time, and Adesanya, I think he won like the second round, I believe. But other than that, man, like, it was a clean sweep for Strickland, you know, and especially with the big knockdown that Strickland got in that first round. So like, there's really not a lot of excuses for Adesanya in this one, as much as people want to try and do that. Strickland went out there and he just outclassed him on the feet completely nearly the entire fight. Strickland was just not backing down in this fight at all. It was like a madman in there. And again, was this the most exciting fight in the world? No, but it was just so wild to see round by round by round by round. You're like, oh my God, Strickland is taking this fight away and away and away, and we're about to see the new champion. I mean, this is one of the biggest upsets of all time, which made it even more of a big deal. And it was a fantastic win from Strickland. And he went out there and he executed the plan perfectly. Moving on up next to going back to one of the worst wins, we're going to be talking about Kamaru Usman's win over Masvidal for their first fight, not the second one, the first one at UFC 251. Now, going into this, you got to realize this was when Masvidal was white hot. He had formed the few fight win streak that he was on. You know, this was after the Ben Askren huge knockout. Like, Masvidal was the star of the company behind like an Adesanya or someone at the time. Like, this is around like that 2020, 2021 era, and pretty sure this one even got like over 1 million pay-per-view buys or something, which as each year goes by, that's even harder to do. So it goes to show. And then when this fight actually went out there and it actually happened, it just completely under-delivered. I feel like we were going to see a bit more of an exciting fight. You know, Usman did, you know, he finished Burns prior. You know, he had an amazing back and forth with Kobe Covington and finished him prior. Usman was really starting to form his legacy at this point as the champion, and with Masvidal being their star, and this was a highly anticipated fight, it just went out there and it fucking under-delivered, bro. And the fact that Masvidal stepped up on 4 days notice and still Usman couldn't get him out of there is impressive. I mean, I want to say this about their second fight, okay? Usman completely went out there the second time, and I almost put that on the list. Usman's win over Masvidal for their rematch, I almost put that on the list in terms of the good wins, because Usman just went out there and he knocked out Masvidal, who I don't think has even been finished before prior, and he got an amazing knockout. He had shown that he had grown since these guys' first fight, and he was going out there and looking for a finish, but that isn't gonna be able, when we're talking about this fight specifically, gonna be able to justify it, unfortunately. There was 94 significant strikes from Usman, 66 from Masvidal, and 16 minutes of control time for Kamaru Usman. So even though Usman went out there and for the most part dominated Masvidal, it was a very underwhelming fight, and the fact that Masvidal was coming in on 4 days notice, I don't care what the hell you want to say about Masvidal's solid takedown defense, or Usman was just playing cautious because Masvidal is very dangerous on the feet, and all that's true, but at the end of the day, man, you can only justify it so much. It was definitely, I feel like, the weakest title win, or one of the weakest title wins of Usman's reign, and Usman had a really, really good reign, so it just sucks to see, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't a good win. It was a boring fight, and for what Masvidal was going in the fight with on 4 days notice, the fact that this is all Usman can do, it kind of was just, I don't know, and I don't want to say all he could do, like, oh, he went out there and he controlled it for 17 minutes, that's not enough, you need a finish for everything. That's not necessarily the case, but I feel like context is everything, and I feel like we were just expecting a bit more, not only just out of this fight, but also from the champion as well. So moving on, up next to, going back to one of the good ones, we are going to be talking about Charles Oliveira's win over Justin Gaethje at UFC 274. Who the fuck could stop Charles Oliveira at this time, bro? I mean, I literally get chills whenever I watch this fight, because I'm hearing like the commentary afterwards, and Anik is screaming, who can stop Charles Oliveira? And DC's going, this dude right here, man. And it's just the energy in the air when Charles Oliveira was the champion and he was on the fucking tear. And he went into this fight the whole, like, he was half a pound overweight, and they ended up stripping him of the belt. So only Gaethje could win the belt going into this fight. Some people were saying, oh, dude, like, Oliveira in the past used to be a quitter, not motivated at times. Like, how's he going to do dealing with all this adversity before the fight even goes down? Like, Gaethje's a bad, bad man. He can take out Oliveira's lights. He's chinny. But Oliveira went out there, and don't get me wrong, Gaethje did make it semi-competitive for him, but Oliveira went out there and put on one of the most exciting entertaining rounds in the UFC, at least that I've ever seen. And it's just, this fight was just such an amazing one for as short as it lasted. That's the biggest crime, but the fact that it was only a round, technically less than. This was a 3-minute and 22-second fight. But the fact that Oliveira went out there and he was hurting Gaethje on the feet, and he was landing big on Gaethje on the feet, and he was outstriking him. And then the fact that he just went out there and he just swooped and he took out Gaethje via the rear naked choke. I mean, it was just a flawless performance. I don't want to say a flawless performance because Gaethje did catch him a few times, but at the end of the day, this is still one of the best title wins of this decade so far. It was explosive. It was relentless. Oliveira went out there and again outstruck him, and that ended up taking the sub via the rear naked choke, and it was just a fantastic win. And for the fans' perspective, we'd love to see it. And Oliveira, man, had just cemented himself at this point. Like, this was peak Oliveira title run, man. It was such a good time, and I have to put respect on this. I almost put Oliveira's win over Poirier on here as well, but I decided to go with the Gaethje one instead because I feel like Poirier gave Oliveira a lot of adversity on the feet in the first round. I feel like, whereas this fight, Oliveira kind of went in there, did his fucking thing, schooled Gaethje in 3 minutes, and then got the hell out. Oliveira got a knockdown, Gaethje got a knockdown. I mean, this shit was just fucking in your face, explosive, and a fantastic win for Charles Oliveira on a fantastic title reign. I miss it, man. So moving on, up next to another one of the good ones of this decade. I know that I've been talking a lot about Adesanya kind of just losing a lot in this video, but I'm putting his win over Alex Pereira at UFC 287 from April of 23, I believe. I'm putting this on there, man, because I gotta say, man, while the first round between these two, you know, Pereira did win that round and was a pretty kind of technical back and forth until the actual knockout happened. And, you know, Alex Pereira did kind of end up outstriking Adesanya, but by a very, very slim margin. It was 49 strikes from Pereira to Adesanya's 41. But I'm including this on this list because A, you know, Adesanya did still make that round and a half competitive before the actual knockout. B, dude, the amount of shit that Adesanya was getting going in this fight, you know, oh, he's 3-0 against you, you don't stand a chance, the kickboxing shit, blah, blah, blah. Adesanya knew he couldn't go out there and lose a fourth fucking time. And dude, honestly, he's right, man, because who knows how people will be talking about his legacy or just talking about the resume or whatever if he went out there and he really did lose to Pereira 4 times in a row. So, not in a row, but losing to Pereira 4 times in general. And man, Adesanya went out there, like I said, the fight was a competitive, kind of slow, bit of a back and forth technical battle on the feet before the actual knockout. But then when Adesanya went out there and knocked him out the way he did, and the fact that this is still the only guy to beat Alex Pereira in the UFC is part of why I have it on this list, middleweight or not. And I'm one of the people that says I don't think Pereira should ever go back down to middleweight because I do think his chin is more compromised down there, but I'm not going to take this win away from Adesanya. You can say whatever the hell you want, but it was just such a good win from Adesanya, and he finally got that massive win over Pereira, which he needed so badly. It was a brutal knockout. It was Adesanya's, you could argue, his best win of his entire career, besides maybe the Whitaker knockout, but honestly, I'd put this one above. And also, you could tell that Adesanya was kind of planning for that because it was the same positioning that Adesanya had rocked him badly in their first UFC fight at the end. I think that was the first round. So the fact that it was the same position, they clearly had kind of a game plan. They were waiting to kind of lure Pereira into that spot, and the fact that he cracked him with nearly the same shot that he did, but this time he actually ended up taking him out cold. The whole arrow celebration and shit. I know that Izzy most of the time he can be cringy, man, but dude, like, it was cold as fuck in this fight. And as someone who, again, I think that Adesanya gets way too much shit. It's wild. I'm really glad that he ended up getting this kind of win for himself and his legacy, because again, the dude needed it. I can't imagine what would happen if he went out there and lost again. So moving on, up next, going back to one of the worst title wins of the decade, Cyril Gane's win over Derek Lewis for the interim title. This is the only interim title one on this list. I almost put like Gaethje's interim title win over Ferguson on here as one of the better ones, but I decided not to include it. I didn't want to put 2 fucking interim title fights. But Cyril Gane's interim title win over Derek Lewis at UFC 265. Now, you could argue that this one doesn't deserve to be on this list because Gane did go out there and he completely schooled Derek Lewis, and that's totally fair. You know, I might be giving this performance a little bit too much shit from Gane, but listen, dude. Derek Lewis, okay, was in his hometown for this one, okay, and was all amped up. I'm pretty sure we saw abs on him going into this fight for the first fucking time, Jesus, but he still went out there and only threw 16 totals, landed 16 significant strikes comparatively to Cyril Gane's 98, and you could say, oh my god, it's a masterclass from Gane, and the fact that he went out there and then he ended up, I think, TKOing him in the 3rd round, so it was a good win from Gane. But Derek Lewis, man, and again, this isn't really as much on Gane as Lewis, but he had nothing in this fight. We just saw a Derek Lewis that was barely fucking swinging, barely doing much. The first round alone, Lewis only landed 3 strikes, and in the second there was 5. We just saw a very hesitant Derek Lewis in there, and he wasn't doing anything with it. And Ciryl Gane, man, you know, he obviously is a volume striker, and he's able to put able to put the pressure on these guys and able to drown them on the feet, and that is what he did with Derek Lewis. Gane has the technicality and the speed, but the reason I'm putting it as one of the worst title wins is just because I remember too feeling like at this time, and maybe I'm wrong about this one, but I remember just being like, this is just such a random ass like interim title shot. Oh shit, I do remember it. This is like, wasn't this only like a little bit after Ngannou defended? And then again, because Dana and them, they had the problems, they were trying to get the belt off him, they kind of just rushed to make the interim title. Not that Gane and Lewis weren't deserving, but it was just seems like such a rushed effort to get the belt off an Ngannou, you know, because for most champions, especially the ones that they like, they wouldn't do this kind of shit or make these kinds of random ass interim title fights. So it just, this fight really shouldn't have been for the strap in the first place, which is also part of why I'm going to be kind of including on this list. It just didn't deserve to really have the title over it, and the fact that Lewis just genuinely brought nothing here. Don't get me wrong, Gane did have good moments. Clearly, he went out there and he did school Derek Lewis, but just all these things being kept in account, I just feel like it's just definitely one of the weakest title wins of the decade. No disrespect to Gane in this one, even though he fucking robbed my boy Volkov, but it is what it is. So moving on to our last one, and we're finishing with some good news here. We're finishing with positive. Well, unless you're a Max Holloway fan, but this one specifically, Ilia Topuria, mate, knocking out Max Holloway at UFC 308 from October of this year. Dude, this fight was a good back and forth on the feet for those first couple rounds, and when you look at the total striking numbers, I mean, Holloway landed 79 significant strikes and Topuria landed 75, so it was very, very close in that regard, but Topuria just went out there, man, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm talking about the opponent as Max Holloway, who's one of the best of all time regardless of weight class, but Topuria showed levels against him, which was wild. He went out there, and in the first round, he was able to take him down. He was able to kind of keep him guessing, like, okay, thought this was going to be a back and forth battle on the feet, and now this motherfucker's trying to shoot at me. Now I got to worry about that, and I'm pretty sure that ended up helping Topuria. And the fact that Topuria was able to stand and bang, and then eventually knock out and knock down clearly one of the best boxers the UFC has ever seen. Topuria was able to go back and forth with him, and then when it came to the ground, of course, Topuria looked great down there. Didn't have too much control time or anything crazy like that, but the fact that he was able to take down Max so clean, landing 2 of 2, and then went back up and started whooping on the feet, and again, eventually knocking out the guy who has one of the best chins of UFC or in UFC history. Absolutely wild. I would put this above the Volkanovski win because I do think that the win over Volk was a great win. Volk is the featherweight GOAT, but I just think there's a little bit more of the asterisk next to it because of the short turnaround. Don't get me wrong, there's a good chance that he might have done that to Volk anyways, but I'm just saying with at least Holloway, there was no questions. You know, you got Holloway who is in his prime right now. You could argue his third fucking prime, Jesus Christ, but Max Holloway is in his prime right now. He had one of the best performances y'all have ever seen at UFC 300, one of the best knockouts of the year, or the knockout of the year. Like, Holloway proved that he's on top of the world, and I understand that he had to move back down to 45 for this one, but like, that's his weight class, you know what I mean, for most of his career. So there's really not any excuses I can give there. Like, I'm sure the fact that he bulked up for 300 definitely made this weight cut harder, and that could have compromised him a little bit, but I can't even use that as an excuse because, again, 45 has always been Holloway's weight class besides a fight here or a fight here, you know what I mean? So Topuria went out there, made the fight super competitive in those first couple rounds, and then the third, he just absolutely ran with it, knocked him out, knocked him down. It was just brutal. It was clean as fuck, and Topuria went out there and he showed that he is one of the most well-rounded fighters in the entire roster, and he's really the villain of the goddamn UFC right now, and we love to see it, or hate to see it. I don't know, it depends who you ask. But anyways, that is gonna pretty much be it for the video. This is some of the best and worst title wins I've seen of the decade. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Again, if there's any I missed, or if there's any you disagree with, let me know. We're here to talk about it, so fuck it. Thank you guys so very much for making it this far in the video. Appreciate y'all a lot for that. All the smoke MMA. Appreciate you guys. Hope you have a good one, and I will see you all next time.